All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, guys, it was rigged. What can I tell you? That is not a conspiracy. It is a simple, objective statement of fact. Let me explain what I mean here. After waiting nearly an entire day and endless speeches about how it was better to be late than wrong, and a day of chastising Sanders supporters for doubting the fairness of a process run by people with manifest contempt for them, the Iowa Democratic Party made the absolutely inexplicable decision to release a partial set of data from the Iowa caucuses that showed 62% of the vote totals. Let's listen.
We have said all along that we were going to make these caucuses the most transparent possible. This year, we're reporting out more data than we ever have reported before. And in addition to that, we have paper trails that we've never had before. And so we're going to take the time we need to verify these results. But these results are being based off what happened in the precincts last night.
Why? Why in the world would you take a mess of already historic proportions and make it even worse, sowing even more mistrust into a process that was already so catastrophically laden with mistrust following the DNC efforts to anoint Hillary back in 2016? As friend of the show Matt Stoller tweeted yesterday, there is no better example of Bernie Sanders' implicit argument that everyone in Democrat establishment politics needs to be fired than last night. Let me just say this. Trust is something that has to be earned. And today, there is absolutely no reason for any anti-establishment supporter to trust that the process will unfold fairly for them. How can you possibly look at a final Des Moines Register poll with positive results for Bernie that gets spiked by the Pete campaign, by the way, followed by a caucus in which Pete claims victory when 0% of the results are in, that turns into a gigantic debacle due to an app developed by people with close ties to Pete who have openly expressed contempt for Sanders? You cannot look at that whole timeline and really expect a group of people who are consistently smeared and dissed by the establishment to feel like they are getting a fair shake. Of course they don't feel that way. But as if that wasn't enough. As if they hadn't done enough damage to any sense of trust in our basic democratic institutions, which they have clearly sold to a coalition of grifters and donors, the pièce de résistance came yesterday evening. I'm not alleging a grand conspiracy here, not at all, but a potent combination of media and Democratic establishment contempt combined with utter incompetence created a perfect opportunity for local party officials to cherry pick the media presentation of results, and that is exactly what happened. Again, that's not conspiracy. It is just literally stating what happened. Party officials decided to release 62% of the results at 5 p.m. with absolutely zero transparency about how they picked those precincts or, when we might expect to get the other 38% of the vote. We did get a little bit more over the night. When's the rest of it coming? Who knows? Effectively erasing massive swaths of Iowa voters, not to mention the incredibly hard work of all of the volunteers and organizers who put their heart and soul into turning out every last person they possibly could. Remember, on election nights, results roll in as they come. There's no cherry picking there. Everyone understands that results are incomplete, but this was something altogether different. This was a group of party elites controlling which numbers the public would get and when they would get them, with massive implications for the media narrative, which is, by the way, the only thing that really matters coming out of Iowa. And sure enough, every major network ran with it. Of course they did. They had no other choice. If you don't call that rigging, I'm not sure what it is really. Now, let's not forget that this is the very same Democratic Party that has been parading around for years now with valid complaints about an electoral college process that privileges rural over urban. This little gem didn't age very well.
At risk of sounding a little simplistic, one thing I believe is that in an American presidential election, the person who gets the most votes ought to be the person who wins.
Something tells me that all the folks who have been relentlessly reminding us that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote are not going to do a similar celebration for what appears to be a decisive popular vote victory for Bernie Sanders, or at least for 62% of the results. Now, honestly, no matter what candidate you support, you should be outraged by the kind of incompetence and meddling that could so tarnish the nominating process of one of America's two great political parties. If Russian bots were somehow involved, you can bet that MSNBC would be in full meltdown mode for years to come. But because it benefits one of their anointed preferred candidates, they'll just accept it instead. Meanwhile, the media has decided that Iowa was terrible for Bernie because he didn't meet expectations.
Jess mentioned that Bernie Sanders set expectations very high, and whatever happens, it's not clear he will have met them. Even if he does eke out a lead, it won't be a decisive win in Iowa, not the kind of decisive win that I think he was looking for. So I can make the case that 3 candidates underperformed expectations. Bernie Sanders, who set them so high.
He literally won the most votes. What are you even talking about right now? But in all of this haze, don't miss the fact that Bernie is in fact better positioned than any other candidate right now to go the distance. He is truly the front runner at this point. Why? Well, just take a look at this key stat from the exit polls. In spite of all the direct attacks coming from the health insurance industry and many of the candidates for the nomination on Medicare for All, roughly 6 in 10 caucus goers said they supported replacing all private health insurance with a single government plan for everyone. This matches recent polling in South Carolina, which shows that 82% of African Americans and voters aged 55 to 64 support Medicare for All. At the same time, exit polls show that Bernie Sanders won an astonishing 43% of voters of color, dominating the next closest competitor among the type of voters who will ultimately decide the Democratic nominee. Biden, as of last night at least, he had not won a single majority African-American precinct in the state, which is stunning. The party elites may have to be dragged kicking and screaming to it, but the party base is making their voice clear, and ultimately, they will not be denied. Sagar, the day before the Iowa caucus, or the day of, we predicted how the media would never give Bernie Sanders a win here, no matter what happened.
Yep.
Now, here he is, like, clearly, I mean, one thing that looks quite clear is that he will end up getting the most votes. We still don't have all the totals, et cetera, et cetera. But it was so predictable that no matter what he did, it was that he didn't meet expectations. He didn't get a big enough win. He didn't do well enough. He set the bar too high. He's the first loser somehow in this whole process.
Well, why are you undermining faith in the democratic process, Krystal? Don't you want the Democrats to win in this is what I'm talking about, which is that if you open your eyes, they can't win, they can't run a basic election. Then they completely mishandle this entire thing. It's more than 24 hours after the votes were cast. In a tiny state with not that many voters, we do not know how many people voted. We do not know who won the election, even by their own metrics that they have come out. And we're supposed to have faith in these people in order to deliver a fair process. I think it's utterly and completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so we
we know these people hate Bernie Sanders. Like, there's no secret about that.
And that's what drives me crazy is the way that they attack you and many others who are, who are causing doubt about this entire thing and saying, hey, here's the thing. Most of the time, people don't consciously be like, let's screw them. What they do is they're like, well, we have 2 options here. We can wait until we have everything, or we can wait to release the partial results now. And by the way, it doesn't hurt that it benefits another candidate. That's how it goes. Bias is all about the implicit little decisions that compound into something in which anybody with open eyes knows what is going on here. And then they gaslight and they say, how dare you undermine faith in the democratic process? And you're like, I just want a fair shake.
Right.
All I'm asking is that you release the results, maybe all at the same time, so that we can just decipher them, with the full context that they deserve. And instead, they decided to play this. And by the way, it doesn't hurt that it hurts somebody that they don't like.
That's exactly right. And you just ask yourself this simple question. If it had been reversed, if these 62% results, I think now we're at like 68% or somewhere.
72 something.
There we go, 72% at this point. If those results had showed a Bernie Sanders narrow lead, would they still put out partial results?
I don't know. Yeah.
And see, that's the thing is like they made a decision, and this is the part, it's not a conspiracy, this is literally what happened. Party elites decided we are going to put out partial results with no transparency into why is this just what we have? When are we getting the rest of them? None of that, and it just so happens to benefit a candidate that they happen to like.
Exactly.
And so, to cast aspersions on Sanders or Yang or any other anti-establishment supporters who look at this process and say, we don't feel like we're getting a fair deal here. Look, they have every reason to be mistrustful of these people. You haven't earned their trust, and you've got a lot more work to do on that front at this point.
You're not crazy, and neither are you if you doubt this.
Indeed. All right, Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That is next.